Okay, good morning FSB members and non-members. My name is Bayo Ego, and today we've got an amazing guest. We'll come to that a bit later. Welcome to the FSB National Webinar. As I said, thank you, Bayo Ego, and thank you for joining us today. I'll be shortly speaking to our guest panel speaker, Joyce CoomberSewell, who is going to be talking to us about some really important aspects about her life, her journey, and her story, and how that has been adapted to her life, her work, her business, and most importantly, her personal life and interactions she's made and relationships she's built. Today's session will be recorded and shortly available on our demand page on the FSB website in case you want to watch it again, and most importantly, in case you want to share it with others. If you aren't an FSB member, we'd love to have the opportunity to speak to you further about the benefits of joining. So please do visit our website, www.fsb.org.uk, to book a meeting with a membership advisor today. So really, without no further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Joyce. Joyce is an amazing person who I met networking, and we've had a number of conversations, we've had a number of webinars together, but really it's about Joyce speaking about her story, her journey, and how she's become the great individual she is today. So over to you, Joyce.
Thank you, Bayo. It's such a privilege to have been invited to do this today, and I'm really excited. I love public speaking. So let me give you a little bit of background. I've just thought I have to press a button that times me because I'm a talker. So my background is that I was born in Hammersmith Hospital in London in 1955. So you maths people can work out how old I am. I was brought up in Langley in Slough, and when I went to school, you had to read flashcards before you could get a book. So when I was in the second year, I had discovered that I couldn't read the words come and because, and the teacher smacked me, and I have no problem with that. That's what was allowed back in the day. But you see, all human beings are meaning-making machines. And so I made that smack mean that I was thick and stupid. I did eventually get a book when I was in my third year. I was the only last person to get a book. But I carried on collecting evidence to prove that I was thick and stupid, the thing I'd made up. So I became a hippie, and I left school at 15 with no qualifications, and like all hippies, believe in free love. It wasn't long before I came home pregnant, and I now have 3 daughters, 11 grandchildren, and 1 great granddaughter who's a very bossy like her granny. Anyway, I kept working, but all very low-level jobs, so factory work, you know, things that really didn't stretch me at all, but I thought that's what I needed to do. Eventually, in my late 30s, I became a classroom assistant, and I took my maths GCSE. And then I got a job, which I thought was the height of any job I would ever get. And please don't hold this against me, but I became a doctor's receptionist. While I was there, I went to Indian classes, decided to take my English GCSE. And so I'd go for a 2-hour lesson, and then I'd go to student support, and somebody would interpret that lesson for me. But this gentleman was very wise. He called in an educational psychologist, and I discovered that I was severely dyslexic, but I also had a higher than average IQ. That made no difference whatsoever to my belief that I was thick and stupid. And like I said, I collected the evidence. So this is going back about 26, 27 years ago. The manager of the doctors decided to put me in charge of filing prescriptions. Now, I can just about do my ABC if I start at A, but for each letter, you have to do it alphabetically. So AA, AB, ABB, etc. Anyway, one day a gentleman came in and he asked for his prescription, which I duly handed to him, and he started to laugh hysterically. I didn't know why, and I said to him, why are you laughing? And he said, you have just handed me my brother's prescription for Viagra. Now, this wasn't my fault. This was the manager's fault. why did she put such a thick and stupid person in charge of prescriptions? Well, life went on and I got introduced to something called landmark education. And while I was doing various different courses with them, I discovered that human beings are meaning-making machines, and that this thick and stupid thing I had made up. And then, you know, I wanted to be right, like we all do. So then life started to change and I got into the telecoms business. I helped run, I was actually the managing director of a telecoms company with a billing platform, and that was quite successful. And I quite enjoyed it. But by now my children were having children. And these children were starting to be diagnosed with autism. So I thought, I can really relate to a lot of this. So at the age of 58, I went to my GP and asked to be diagnosed. The first thing he did was send me off to a clinic, and they diagnosed me with having ADHD and dyspraxia. Now, dyspraxia is poor hand-eye coordination, so I'm extremely clumsy. I go to put my toothbrush on the shelf, and everything on that shelf will just suddenly jump off. I don't even have to touch it, it just happens. I don't know. I walk into things, I'm always bruised. But I didn't find out until years later that there actually is verbal dyspraxia as well. So I have trouble pronouncing certain words. Anyway, so I got through this first piece of being looked at for autism, and you have to have 3 questionnaires filled in. You fill in one, somebody close to you, so in my case my wife filled in the other one, and then you have to have a questionnaire filled in by somebody who knew you as a child. Now the problem is when you're older you often can't get that 3rd questionnaire filled in. My parents were deceased. I'm estranged from my siblings. I don't have any contact with them. All my teachers from, you know, senior school even were now deceased. So the next thing that happens is I was sent to see a psychologist, and the psychologist, I was in a waiting room. He came and collected me. We walked along a long corridor, and he said, what was the first thing you thought of when you met me this morning? Now, I'm not silly. I knew the right answer. I should have been saying, oh, he looks very nice, or I'm a little bit nervous. I hope this goes well. But I thought, you know what? I'm here to actually get this diagnosis. So I thought, I'm going to tell him what I really thought. And so I said to him, why didn't you iron your shirt this morning? He was like, oh. But I wanted to tell him the truth. Anyway, at the end of an hour, he said to me, I'm 98% certain you're autistic, but I can't give you the diagnosis because you didn't get that 3rd questionnaire filled in. Now, I am particularly stubborn and extremely bossy. So I went back to my GP and he referred me to the Maudsley Hospital. Not that you ever go there because they subcontract it out. So my first appointment, I went, and this time still had to have the 3 questionnaires. I still couldn't get the 3rd questionnaire filled in because I can't raise people from the dead. I don't have that superpower. So then this one that was, look at all these pictures, tell me with a story, here's some building bricks, make them fit the patterns, and then you wait, and you wait months. And then I went to see a psychiatrist. Now this psychiatrist gave me a diagnosis. I'm going to stop there and come back to that in 2 seconds. I actually, early this year, I completed my master's by research into autism. And one of the things I found out is that the NHS used something called DSM-5. It's an American kind of how we decide what's what and who's who and what category you fall under. In the last century, it was DSM-4. And that's when, at the beginning of the 20th century, autism got its name. By the time we got to the end of the 20th century, we had started giving names to lots of other conditions. So ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, OCD, there's millions of them. And so the powers that be decided there was too many. So they took them all out and they put in an umbrella called Autism Spectrum. So if you think of Autism Spectrum as an umbrella, all the spokes of the umbrella are all these individual conditions. DSM-5 is this century, and that is what I should have been diagnosed with, DSM-5, autistic spectrum. But she diagnosed me with PDD-NOS, pervasive developmental disorder, not otherwise specified. Now, PDD no longer exists except for as a spoke on an umbrella, should have been autistic spectrum. NOS, not otherwise specified, because I couldn't raise my parents from the dead and get them to fill in a form. And this is becoming a big issue for older people, that they can't get the correct diagnosis. You do have to be stubborn. And I talk to a lot of people. I'm a mentor. I work with disabled university students. A lot of them are on the autistic spectrum. But I also work with parents whose children are diagnosed, but the parents are not given any help or understanding. And I work with businesses. So, for example, I worked with a business who had a young lady working for them for several years, perfectly happy with her until COVID hit. This lady would develop presentations, but during COVID, she was expected to present them on Zoom. And she did it very well, but eventually she had to admit she couldn't do it anymore. She was having meltdowns and just couldn't cope. And the company were going to get rid of her. And so I talked to everybody, and what was decided was that she would still create the presentations. Someone else would do the presentation, not her. And I asked for her to be moved out of the great big office where there was loads of people, because quite often autistic people lack some of the neurotypical social skills. We don't like noise, lots of light, lots of activity. So they gave her just a tiny little corner of her own where she was away from people, and everybody was extremely happy. Now, for me, I got that diagnosis, and people say to me, well, what's the point? You're old, you're not at school, or, you know, you're not going to get any help, so what's the point? And I say to people, well, once you've got your diagnosis, you've known the whole of your life that you're different. Neurodiverse people are different from neurotypical people. At the age of about 4, I thought I was an alien dropped from another planet. And I think still to some extent think that's possibly true. And it helped me having that diagnosis. But I also have to remember that getting my diagnosis sets an example for my children and my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, and all those that come along after, that they'll be able to trace the lineage, because we inherit this. See, I'm not broken. I'm not disabled. I don't want to be cured, even if there was a cure, which there isn't, and there never will be. And the world needs both neurodiverse and neurotypicals. Let me give you an example. In my household, up until a couple of years ago, there was 5 of us. There was myself, my eldest grandson, his husband, and his half-brother. And us 4, all on the autistic spectrum. On the other hand, my wife isn't, as she is a brainiac. She's got her PhD and she's a member of Mensa. And that means that you have to have an IQ in the top 2% of the world. Hers is in the top 1%. So people would say to my wife, oh, it must be really hard for you looking after those 4. Must take care of yourself, take some time out, you know, all those sort of well-meaning comments. But us 4, we said, you've got to be joking. It takes 4 of us to look after her, because in our household, we were normal and she wasn't. And it really just makes a difference between the group that you're with. So I can do public speaking in front of thousands of people. I can run networking groups. I can do just about anything if I have a role to play. If, on the other hand, I'm just invited to a wedding, I find that really, really difficult unless they let me go and do the washing up. Okay, so my big thing is I've just been accepted to do my PhD. And again, I'm going to look at autism, but I'm also going to look at the leveling up that this world at the moment, we see differences. We need those labels. I don't want us to always have those labels. So we've got to learn to stop judging people either by a condition, color of their skin, their gender. It doesn't matter what the differences is, language, it really, really doesn't matter. Because at the end of the day, the only one thing we all have in common is that we're human. I'm a human being. Bayo's a human being. The fact that he's a man and I'm a woman is immaterial. We're just human. And if we start seeing each other as humans, maybe we'll stop judging one another. You see, I'm not less than, I'm not more than. The fact that my wife has a PhD and I don't doesn't make any difference. I'm the domestic goddess. She's a really good cook. It makes no difference. So in my family, I look back now, my old mum, I think she was probably on the spectrum. And from my mum down, there's 54 descendants. And 66% of us are on the autistic spectrum. My middle daughter, though she would be labelled autistic, I believe has some form of brain damage, traumatic birth, forceps delivery, I think it damaged her mind. She is the only person in my family with a lower than average IQ. It's not my speciality. I have never studied it. It's not something I'm particularly interested in. My field is autistic people of normal or higher IQs. And, you know, we're not broken. We don't need fixing. Because Bayo's a man, I don't know if he's married to a woman, but if he is, that doesn't make him broken. He's just a bloke. The fact that I'm a woman and I'm married to another woman, that doesn't make me broken. We're just human beings. And autism is awesome. You know, 90% of people who work for Google are autistic. Autistic people happen to be very gifted in the arts, in technology, music. My eldest grandson's just completing his PhD. He's a composer, not of music I understand, but of music. And, you know, neurodiversity, we say neurotypicals, but does that really exist? Are there any? When my wife completed her Mensa exam and found out that she had this amazing IQ, it took her weeks to come to terms with it because she'd spent most of her life hiding her IQ because people thought she was weird. She talks academic language. I don't understand it particularly, but she's not broken. She doesn't need fixing. You know, I would encourage you to get a diagnosis of whatever, because at the moment we need it, but in time, hopefully in my lifetime, we'll stop needing it, that we'll just see each other as equal human beings doing whatever we do. Let's face it, would the chief executive of a company do the cleaning, and yet we don't value the cleaner? You know, we've got to level this up. I know that there's a lot of questions coming in because I can see them on the bottom of my screen. So Bayo, I'm going to go over to you and I'm going to say, let's do the Q&A.
Awesome, Joyce. Awesome. And before we do that, thank you again, Joyce. Every time I hear that story or a revision of that story, it does make you think about how what it is you have been labelled or not labelled, and how you label or do not label individuals. But as Joyce has said, we do have a Q&A, and I can see Margaret Christie has been busy in the Q&A box, so that's great. If there are other questions, please pop them in there, and we'll take from there, and we'll expand on some of the questions that I might ask Joyce myself. And if you want to contact Joyce or I directly, you'll see in our names, we have our contact details there as well, 2 simple email addresses. But let me just go back to a couple of questions while the Q&A starts to build up. Joyce, so question of normality is one you always talk about. And if you think about the world as we live in the last few years, 100 years, whatever, my father used to say to me that equality is a given, and no, diversity is a given and equality is a choice. In the world that you've lived in, how have your choices affected who you have become or who people have expected you to become?
I think for me, certainly when I was a younger woman, and you've got to remember, I am old. Okay, so for those who don't understand the maths, I'm 67. So life was very different back then. And coming home as an unmarried mother was, I mean, that was terrible back in the day, whereas now it's acceptable and things do change. And not being able to read and not being able to spell properly. Back then, I'd get 3 out of a spelling test of 20 correct. Now, I got a bit of kit on my computer called Dragon. I talk to my Dragon. My Dragon does all my typing for me. So the leveling up is very different today, and it will be different again in 20 years' time. I think that, so there's a thing called masking, where we mask what we're thinking, feeling, or how we would behave. And all human beings mask. It's not just an autistic thing, though us autistics are better at it. So you're standing with a group of friends and someone tells a joke and everybody laughs. And you're standing there and you think, I don't get why that's funny. I guarantee you'll laugh because you don't want the others in the group to think that you're stupid. So you laugh. That's masking. You get that phone call, you think it's your boss, a potential client, you put on that slightly posher voice, speaking a better way, and then you find out it's your mum, your best friend, and that all changes. It's just masking, and we all do it all the time. Over to you, Bayer.
Brilliant, thanks for that, and it's quite this segue into the next question from Khurram Chowdhury, and apologies, Khurram, if I've pronounced your name correctly, but I'll read his question. We help parents to help support children to have a love of reading. I resonate with your levelling up agenda and would like to know how we can work with organisations to create impactful, personalised books around diversity and condition, around specialities, special needs.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because I've actually come across a gentleman who's writing books with no words. Just pictures, and they're not just for children, they're for adults as well, but they would explain all sorts of things, how to use the washing machine, how to make a doctor's appointment, how to do the plumbing, it doesn't matter what it is. We're obsessed with using words. As a parent, I'm a great believer in reading to children. I always read to my children. My youngest daughter, who is severely dyslexic, I was still reading to her, 11, 12, 13 years of age. She liked C.S. Lewis, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. I read all those books to her. And she didn't care if I got the words right or I skipped a word because I couldn't read it either. But reading to your children is so, so important. And, I learned to read on something called Janet and John, where there was about 3 or 4 words on a page. It doesn't matter what your child is reading, and it's the encouragement, it's the praise, it's doing it with them and working with your child to get them to read. And there are books out there that are picture books with no words, that they can tell the story from the pictures, and that is so important.
Yeah, reading is blessed, and if you can do that, start at a very early age, it's very helpful in helping to identify a number of issues or non-issues that your child may have. And that leads to another question that is actually in the chat, and I want to raise with you: diagnosis at a later age or later on in life or in your space of work. You mentioned how you went out to get diagnosed, and I have stories, and I can tell stories of friends who are told later on, when they go to do formal education, post-education, that they're actually being diagnosed. How does that work, Joyce?
Okay, so I started university at the age of 60, which is when I did my bachelor's in counselling, coaching and mentoring. And all universities have really good student support. And if you go to them and speak to them, and it's the same in college, if you're doing an evening class or a full-time class, there will be student support. And if you go to them and explain what your struggles are, they will bring in an educational psychologist to do an assessment. Now, at university, the universities will do it's like a tick box test on the internet. And from there, they will call people in if they really do believe you've got dyslexia or autism or any of the other things. I'm just going to kind of sidetrack a little bit, Bayo, because it's different with school children. With school children, the school has a responsibility, and you as a parent have a legal right to insist on an educational psychologist assessing your child. The school will try to fob you off, to stop you. Don't listen to them. Your legal right is to have your child assessed, and it is a battle, but for your child's sake, I would really encourage you to pursue that battle.
Yeah, and a conversation we often have, Joyce, is if you don't ask, you don't get, and you've got to ask that question. Got an anonymous attendee here, and I'm going to read this one in full because it's quite powerful, and it's segue to businesses. Really great talk, thank you. I was diagnosed at 43. I run my own company, and my clients come back to me time after time because of my detail and focus. It's what they love. Asperger's has given me that gift. However, on the flip side, it makes me very hard to employ people, as no one can reach the high standards I set. And I know you've given a good story in your speech today. Joyce, can you share with us how we could address that, particularly in this space that we're living in today?
The thing is, autistic people do tend to like to dot the T's and cross the T's and dot the I's. See, can't even get that right. But it's working to strengths. So my wife and I run our own business. She does do a lot of the office type. She says she would never let me touch the invoicing. But I'm much more meticulous in making sure that we have a proper structure. So our back office, where the invoicing's done, I have completely rejigged it so that how it's done, how it's labeled, what file it goes in. Because a bit like you, I like it like that. So when you're interviewing people for a job, it's looking for what their strengths may be, and they may not be the same as yours. They may not be that meticulous, but if you could set up the structure for them or let them start and then restructure it. I mean, since I've restructured our invoices, my wife says it's so much easier to do. But she wasn't capable, even with her Mensa brain, she wasn't capable of setting it up the way I've set it up, which works really well. So it's looking for people's strengths, because everybody has strengths, they're just different strengths. And sometimes us bosses, we have to do some of the jigging around and change the role we play, really, and let other people be in the front and we sort it out behind it, if you understand what I mean. I'm totally with you. I like everything in order, everything in its right place. If you could see the ornaments here, they're all structured properly, and woe betide anybody that moved them.
Okay, so, and again, that's for you personally, Joyce. So here's a couple of questions. I'll ask the first one from Dan Benton. Should I do anything differently to advertise job postings to neurodiverse applicants?
There's a good one. See, now I'm old, and I struggle with the new terminology that's coming in. Okay, so for instance, the they, them, and it thing. In my generation, the word it is an insult, and I would really struggle to refer to someone. So if Bayo wanted me to refer to him as they, them, rather than him or he, I would really struggle. So I think really when you're advertising, it's got to be quite neutral. And I think you've just got to be really, really careful on the wording. And good luck to you. I'm glad I'm too old for all of that stuff, because it is really, really hard keeping up with the new terminology. I'm not saying the terminology is right or wrong. It just is the way it is, that the younger generations, the 20, 30-year-olds are rewriting the words. I mean, back in the day, you couldn't use the word gay. Right at the very beginning, gay just meant fun. Then gay meant being a homosexual, and that was bad. And now gay, everybody is like, I'm proud to be gay. So the terminology, the meaning of words changes over generations. But yeah, be neutral.
Yeah, and also I think I want to combine these two. Zoe Bowden asked a question: what advice would you give a hiring manager about how to effectively recruit and retain people with neurodiversities? I think you've touched on that. If I move to Christine Hope's Christine Hope's put this in there, and I think it answers some of what Zoe's asking is, Christine has set up a small business called Skull Ship Design Studio, so her autistic son can have a shot at working part-time as a graphic designer illustrator within a workplace that meets his sensory needs. She's now working to promote his skills and strengths as a creative, so other small businesses and community groups will choose him to design artwork for them. How do you approach getting over the barriers of companies' people, assuming that there would be a problem hiring him?
First of all, so the first thing is we need to all be out and proud. Out and proud. I tell everybody I meet that I'm autistic. Okay, I don't hide that fact. And I think we've got to start normalizing it so that nobody flinches. I mean, I think it's fantastic that your son has a workplace. But, you know, it's not just us autistics. I heard a story of a young girl. She finished university. She had a very good degree, and she would apply for jobs. And she would do really well at the application until it got to interview, because she was in a wheelchair. And then what happened is companies said, oh, we'd love to offer you a job, but we can't get you in and out of the building. We don't have ramps and things, lifts. The 20th job she went for, the role was in an office on the 3rd floor, and it was not accessible. There was no lift, it was stairs. This company said it's not a problem. And they took the people who worked on the ground floor, they moved them to the 3rd floor. The people who worked on the 3rd floor were moved to the ground floor. She started to work on the Monday. We've got to learn to think outside of the box. And if you're interviewing people and they reveal that, or you suspect they might be on the spectrum, putting them in an office full of 50 other people isn't going to work. Asking them to do presentations isn't going to work. Find out, don't be frightened to ask people what they want, what they need, how can their needs be met? If we could get to the point where we're all open and not frightened. I know loads of autistic people won't put it on their CVs, but until we put it on our CVs, it's not going to get normalized.
Good shout. Okay, Giles is there, has really come up with something there. Should they disclose to potential clients that they have Asperger's in the early stages of the onboarding process? Goes on to say, feels like they should. in the spirit of being open and transparent and wanting the client to make allowances and reasonable adjustments, which is what you've just said there. So
yeah, totally agree with that.
Thank you, Giles. That's very much so. Leanne, absolutely love this talk, Joyce. Thank you. Do you have any advice for us to take better care of our older friends and relatives that might be neurodiverse but can't or won't get a diagnosis?
The same as if they weren't neurodiverse, love them. Just love them, serve them, meet their needs. My mum, I mean, okay, I'm biased because I loved her a lot and she loved me, but my mum would always find something to laugh at, even if the life was really bad. She would always find something to laugh at. And my mum was always one of these people. I was 50 years old and she was still telling me to mind how I crossed the road. That's just who she was. But she was in a wheelchair. She'd been in a wheelchair 35, 40 years. You know, towards the end, you know, she had dementia. That didn't stop me loving her and serving her and making allowances for her, you know, because that's, my wife makes allowances for me every single day. But I said, she's a really good cook. I've known her 13 years. I still can't teach her to load the dishwasher properly. Now, I can either nag her and nag her and nag her and teach her and teach her and teach her. I just do it myself. It's simpler. And why would I put her under that much pressure? Whereas she can write journal articles and teach people study skills at universities. So we work to each other's strengths and we take up the slack. With an older person, you know, if they don't want to go out, don't make them go out. If they do want to go out, choose times when it's not crowded, when it's quieter. There are a lot of things you can do to increase the quality of an older person's life without making them do things they don't want to do.
Good shout. Thank you for that, Joyce. I want to go back to Margaret's question. Please can you comment or recommend any reading about what the scientific evidence is that autism, etc., are more than natural variations in extent and types, and also whether neurodivergence can be attributed to nature or nurture.
Okay, so the first thing to say is you can see my name, Joyce CoomberSewell. If you go to Google Scholar, put my name into Google Scholar, you'll come up with my master's thesis, and there's a lot in there. Miss the first few chapters, it's theoretical framework, it's full of gobbledygooch words that even I don't understand. But go down, it's 19th, 20th and 21st century, the development, how things have changed, there's a conclusion. Have a look there. If you go onto the National Autistic Society's website, actually log yourself in, get in. They put journal articles on, but you have to be a logged in member. You can't, you know, if you just look at it, you won't find that, but you can go, there's lots and lots of journal entries. As far as nurturing and nature, that applies to everybody. How we're brought up, of course, applies, but you can't make somebody autistic. They're born autistic. It's just a different form of neurowiring in our brain. It's not that something went wrong in the development stage, and it's certainly not because parents didn't bring them up properly. I mean, you know, I'm 67. I was brought up in the age where smacking your children was perfectly normal. My eldest grandson was brought up, he's 27, he was brought up in an age where that wasn't normal, but he's as autistic as I am. So, you know, we should be good to all children. We should develop them, nurture them, expand them, excite them. I am a great believer in getting them off screens and getting them out in the countryside and all that stuff. But, you know, you can't make somebody autistic. You can help them by getting them diagnosed and learning about autism to help them live a very, very full life.
Okay, thanks, Joyce. I have another question from an autonomous person. Like you, she works for her wife, with his wife. She too can only work with strict structure and organization. However, it is communication that they struggle with. the tone of her voice is interpreted as anger, and her verbal instructions come across as too harsh. Please, can you offer any support to my wife, in particular, as how she can manage this, as yet she's still to find a support group for spouses?
That's a really good question, which I don't have an answer particularly for. I think you would get support through the National Autistic Society. Quite often there are autistic groups in local areas. One of the problems I find, though, is they tend to deal with people who have severe learning difficulties rather than people of normal IQs. The other side of this wall lives another grandson. He's 23, autistic. He's a selective mute, and he's a recluse. He hasn't been out of his apartment ever. He just lives in there. Very intelligent young man, taking a degree on the Open University in computers and business. He wants to run his own business, but he will never be able to talk to a client. So, you know, he'll do everything, email, messenger. I will manage the phones myself or my wife for him. So he can't talk to people. I mean, he can't always talk to me. Funny enough, he can always talk to his cats, though. But other than the cats, he doesn't talk to people. So we do the talking for him. And if you have a problem with the written word, like in emails and messenger, that they come over harsh, then the only advice I can give you is write them and send them to your wife. My wife does all my proofreading. My wife is a professional proofreader, so she'll proofread anything and everything for me. And I know that I can come over, you know, a bit, you know, do it my way or no way. So I have to be careful about that.
Okay, thank you, Joyce. Another business-related question here. I run a small business and have autism and probably some form of ADHD, as does my workshop manager. One issue we both have is a need to have distraction in order to focus, such as music, videos, podcasts, etc., in order to filter out the background noise of the office or workshop. Do you have any tips that have helped you focus either in or a solo or group environment?
I would say if it's not possible for you to have an office on your own, get a screen, an opaque screen, so you can't see people, people can't see you. If you need a distraction, if you need to have an iPod or music playing, then that's fine. I'm the opposite. I can't have sound, which is why I'm on the dining room table and my wife has her office in another room. For me, I can't sit and work for hours and hours and hours. I intersperse my work by going and doing something else. Now, I mean, you know, since COVID, we work from home, so that might be putting the washing machine on or feeding the cat, but I intersperse it. I can't do a whole hour of work without a couple of breaks, putting the kettle on, whatever it is. So it's, I mean, you and this other chap, you've just got to redo it how it works for you. If you've got other employers with you, tell them, say, look, me and him, we're autistic, we need it this way. This is the way it's going to be. If then, and you may be opening a gate for someone else that's in your employment to say, well, actually, I think I'm autistic too. So maybe talk to the people who you work with and see what works for everybody. You know, it's a really, the solutions are always simple. It's us humans that complicate them.
Good shout. Thank you for that, Joyce. Joyce, so we're going to go back to the questions of testing. There's two here. One slightly different. This is from Debbie. Is there a test which isn't via an educational institution? I need to be properly tested, but the NHS is a 2 to 4 years waiting list. I like a test which does test more than just one aspect of neurodiversity. Is that possible?
Yeah, well, if you go to the National Autistic Society website, they do actually have a free tick list. A good place to start. Go and do some ticking. And I know at this point, people are going, oh, well, you know, everybody's a little bit autistic. No, it just means, oh, we're a little bit human. And so, yes, everybody can tick some boxes, but the more boxes you can tick, the more liable you are to be on the spectrum. You can go private, but it costs. You're talking £2,000-3,000 to get a private assessment. And there's lots of places, you can just Google it. There's loads of places that will do private assessments. On the other hand, if you go to your doctor, you know, it is a 2 to 4 year waiting list. Oh, it was a 2-year waiting list the first time I tried. The second time, it took me another 3 years. And because we've had COVID, so all waiting lists are much, much longer. So yes, go private if you can afford it. But if not, the sooner you go to your doctor, the sooner you'll be on that waiting list.
Sure. Question from James. We have used Senkos to manage the introduction of an undiagnosed neurodiverse colleague. James has a DH diagnosis. We spend a lot of time and money adapting the business to make sure everyone has the best opportunity for success. Is there any government support available to fund this investment in our people?
Not that I'm aware of. Can I just say something here? Please don't forget that neurotypicals have needs too. So let me just explain that. I've got, my wife and I have got some friends. He's autistic like me, she isn't. And they came round for a meal one day and me and him, we go, hello. Yeah, that's it. My wife and his partner hug. I'm not talking about the polite, quick hug. I'm talking about the minutes hug where they hug, and it makes my skin curl. And I said, I don't know how you do that. It's gross. It's horrible. And she said to me, she said, do you know what? You autistics expect us to make allowances for you, but you're not prepared to make allowances for us. And that was a real aha moment. So within every company, it's not about making allowances just for the diverse people. Find out what everybody needs. And then you'll have a much happier workforce and everybody will work better and you'll get more production.
Yeah, I think that sort of rolls off with what Samantha is asking here. She's just about to complete or working towards her chartered manager's degree. She's super interested in trying to work this into every part of her degree. How can employers best connect with or encourage diversity at work?
It is really simple. It is about having that conversation, whether that's one-on-one, whether that's a group discussion, whether it's sending out a questionnaire. It is about everybody realizing that it's not just neurodiverse people who need help and, you know, allowances made and things like that. It's every single human being. And if we were only to get that, that would really, really help level everything out. And then we could throw away all the diagnoses. We wouldn't need it because it would be acceptable in every part of society. And it is society that governs everything. I know we all think it's the government, and I know they play a part. But actually, if society changes, everything will change.
Yeah. And to be honest, if you think about it, in any business, it's essential to consider the different perspectives and points of view, as you've just demonstrated in a lot of your answers today, Joyce. We all need to recognise that we live in a neurodiverse society, and the employment of those should be reflected in the workforce. And as some of the questions I've talked about is how you then adapt or make adaptations viable for all. So that's quite difficult. Really great questions flowing through here. It's 10 to 11, as you know, we go on for about an hour. So I'm going to take a few more questions. I'm going to ask Joyce a couple of questions if I don't go through what's on the Q&A. But here's one from Joanna. Late diagnosed female here. One of the things which finally led to the penny dropping in my diagnosis was my practically pathological people-pleasing imperative. We're running a small business together, and my people please start again. We're running a small business together, and my people pleasing drive is a good thing. It sure is a good thing, of course, but it's difficult to turn it off, which is an impact on my time management. Any hints to strike a balance would be welcome. And thank you for a thought-provoking session. Thank you, Joanne, for a very good question.
We're back to masking, I'm afraid. So if you like, my thing is being kind. Okay, but I take it to the extreme, which then I get accused of being bossy. But my bossiness is I want the very best for people. And so with your people pleasing, it's really, before you do it, is stepping back and asking yourself, is this really, really going to help? People pleasing with your family is very different, but at work, you know, it's one thing being the person that puts the kettle on in the morning, but if you're the person putting the kettle on 10 times a day, I'm afraid human nature is what it is, and people will let you. So it might be that you need to start thinking about not so much stopping pleasing people, but delegating the pleasing to someone else. So instead of you putting on the kettle 10 times, set up a rota. And it is about thinking outside the box. And sometimes we have to suppress our natural instincts, which is just another form of masking.
Thank you very much for that. And I have one from Penny, which is really interesting. Joyce, that is a fab. This is for you shared your story. Yes, we need to normalize this. However, I understand that most of those who diagnose autism are not autistic themselves. Do you think this needs to change?
Oh, 100%, 100%. When I did my bachelor's degree, at third year, you have to do a dissertation. So I did a survey on counsellors, coaches and mentors. Were they adequately trained in the autistic spectrum? I knew the answer was no, but I had to prove it. At best, they may have done a very basic, what's called a spell course. It's very, very basic, but most of them had nothing. And so what was happening is people would go along, they're on the spectrum, and the advice or the help or the direction they were put towards them was what you would do for neurotypical. And it is the same when people are assessing, it's tick boxes, and they don't really understand the way I mean, obviously they're going to have some training, but there's a difference between being trained and being autistic. It's a bit like, I don't know what it's like to be a man because I'm a woman. I've got some idea what it's like. And earlier today, we were all taking the mickey out of Bayo a little bit because he's a man and there was 3 women in the room. So, you know, we all do that, but I don't know what it's like to be a man. I know what it's like to be an autistic, but remember, I don't know what it's like to be a non-autistic. So yes, the answer to your question, yes, we need to get more autistic people taking up these sorts of roles so that they give a true picture, they really understand, though they'd also have to be trained not to be biased. That's the other thing.
Definitely that. So last questions from the Q&A. It goes to Lynn, and it really is relating to your studies and what you've done so far and your PhD to come, no doubt. Are there specific universities who are leading in the field with research into neurodiversity? I'm an ex-teacher and I have an autistic child, so I want to examine how can we do things better to support her. I would like to make some links with professional organizations. Thanks.
The thing with universities is different. A lot of universities don't have a department that deals with autism. Locally to me, there is one, but they deal with those with severe learning difficulties. I'm actually going to Brighton University. Not that anybody ever goes to university nowadays, it's all done on Zoom and Teams. So there are, I mean, if you just go onto Google Scholar and put in autism, you'll come up with loads of journal articles and people's theses and things like that. On LinkedIn, I go out of my way to link to people who have an interest on autism. But I just need to say that beating up non-autistics is not going to help the situation. Pointing out to non-autistics that they're bad and wrong for not understanding us doesn't help. It just makes the rift between us even bigger. We need to build relationships, build friendships, share the love, and then it makes it easier for everybody. I want to understand neurotypical people, how they function, and then hopefully they will learn how autistics function. I have no experience of being in a wheelchair. You know, I have no experience of being a man or anything. You know, we just need to be gentle and kind to one another.
Brilliant. That was awesome, Joyce.
I've loved it. I've loved it. And please fire any questions you want to me. Use my email address. I'll happily answer. I'll Zoom with people. And can I just say, I don't charge. I know it's a contentious thing with my wife. What I say is, if you want to give me some money, great, but I don't care if you don't. My passion is helping people understand neurodiversity. So ping me emails, set up Zooms with me, link with me on LinkedIn. I love it.
Well, you've answered part of my ending.
Sorry, Bayo. Sorry.
That's all good. That's brilliant. So Joyce's details, as you can see there, find her on LinkedIn. She is 100% interested in engaging with people who want to talk about this subject matter. As said to you all, thank you all so very much for being part of this webinar. Some amazing questions, some amazing feedback in the Q&A. If you've got some questions that weren't answered, or if you've got some questions that you didn't ask, please send them through directly to Joyce. It's been a blast. It's been really good. I've always loved listening to Joyce, and most importantly, I've listened to some of the answers she's given, because late diagnosis of autism or a neurodiverse difference is key to understanding what it has made you, and more importantly, what it is that you need to do to move forward. I hope you've all taken that equally from this discussion. Joyce, any last words?
Love one another, be kind to one another. That's the answer to all of this. It's not rocket science. It's not having degrees and studying. Just be kind.
Excellent. And as I said, my old man used to say, diversity is a given, inclusion is a choice. We all have choices to make, and it's making those right choices that hopefully will create greater diversity in our homes, in our workplaces, and in our businesses. So thank you all very much for joining us this morning. I hope you've enjoyed it. I think the questions and the answers have proved that we have. Look forward to seeing you again soon, FSB members alike.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.